Hello and welcome to another episode of our Brothers Creed podcast, where we talk about motivation, experiences, and we explore the world around us. We are the Thomas Brothers, and I'm Jared.
And I'm Ethan. And today we have an awesome guest on. His name is Brandon Andrews, and he is the owner of the brand MeatPowered. And he lives a carnivore diet lifestyle, so he only eats meat. And this episode, we dive into. Jared and I have both kind of been interested about this a little bit, and so we dive into the life of the carnivore lifestyle, only eating meat. Brandon goes into kind of the three levels of intensity, let's say, all the way down from meat, salt, and water up to maybe adding in some fruits and some vegetables
No, it was
and different things.
beef, salt, and water. That was like the most extreme.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, beef, salt, and water.
And then you can get down where you like a variety of meats and some vegetables and fruits and stuff. But yeah, he's a great guy, super humble. He's building his brand around this. He's been doing it for what, 7 years? He said.
Yeah.
Really, really great conversation. I mean, I was just peppering with questions. I mean, I just was. I mean, we could talk to him for 2 or 3 hours. I was telling him at the end, but it was a great episode, a great teaser, and I'm looking forward to hearing more of his content. So
Yeah, he's got Instagram, TikTok. He does a lot of shorts, just kind of educational stuff, and he's trying to drive, this healthier lifestyle, which is kind of what Jared and I are all about on the podcast. Just building your creed, becoming healthier in mind, body, and spirit.
that's right.
And so this will be definitely one of those episodes that can help you to do that.
All right, let's dive in and do it.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back.
Most valuable commodity I know of is information.
And that, my friends, is called integrity. That's called courage. Now that's the stuff leaders should be made of.
Either you're somebody or you're nobody.
You're not the devil. You're practice.
All right, today on the podcast we have Brandon Andrews. Brandon, welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we originally reached out to Brandon. He has we originally saw his content on social media about living a carnivore lifestyle. He has the company MeatPowered, and where he does a lot of these. You do like meal plans and different things like that. And you have a lot of
Educational
these tips and tricks on eating all meat. And so, Jared and I, we're both men. We love meat, and we're like, man, we got to reach out. We got to talk to this guy. We got to see what this carnivore lifestyle is all about. So, Brandon, kind of maybe give us a little bit of a background of, have you always eaten this way, or is it something that's relatively new, or how did you find it? What kind of sparked that for you?
Yeah, so I started this whole diet thing about 7 years ago, and yeah, for me it was out of necessity. So I was really unhealthy. Had just kind of done whatever throughout my life, standard American diet. Grew up, drinking sodas and eating candy, the whole thing, normal upbringing. And then, I would say probably, yeah, I started in 2016. So at the time I was, my early 30s, and just like everything was falling apart. So long story short,
That sounds familiar.
yeah. It turns out like you can't just like live on just junk food your whole life. At some point, you got to make a transition.
It catches up with you in your 30s if you do.
Yeah. And and to be fair, like I was always kind of like struggling with health as a kid and whatnot. So I tried like to do like healthy diets according to like mainstream stuff. And unfortunately, nothing ever really worked for me. I remember when I was younger, for example, like you'd see at the grocery aisle, like Cheerios with a heart sign on it, healthy for your heart. So as a kid, I was like, oh, I got to eat more Cheerios. That's good for my heart. So I would eat Cheerios for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and the whole thing. We all kind of gone there. But yeah, in my late teens and 20s, I tried to get in shape, go to the gym, get healthy, that kind of thing. So tried all the stuff that came out at the time, whether it was paleo or gluten free, or even just like the standard advice, which was like little to no red meat and like a huge plate of veggies.
Yeah.
So I tried that stuff. And yeah, it's just like, unfortunately, nothing ever worked. And so, yeah, I just kind of like gave up on it, would go try things and then not work and go back. And it was just this roller coaster. And yeah, so by the time I was in my late 20s, early 30s, like things were just really a mess. And, so it got to the point where I was like so desperate and I felt like I had tried everything between the, all veggies and no red meat to gluten free to like kind of everything in between. And I found myself on a corner of the internet that was talking about eating like nothing but red meat. And I thought it was the craziest thing I'd ever heard. Like, it's just like you grow up, especially in the time that we've grown up, you hear that like red meat is bad for you. So
Oh, yeah.
you limit your intake. And so hearing that someone's only eating red meat is like, what? So yeah, but it was coming from a group of pretty, smart people at the time. I was like, wow, they're talking about it, so that's interesting. And they were talking about the science and the history and the anthropology and the evolutionary theory about how all things maybe came to be over the last 2-3 million years. The whole story. I went into it. And I was like, well, I guess I'll give it a shot because I've tried everything else, and this is actually starting to make some sense. So yeah, I gave it a shot. It was really bumpy because at the time there weren't a lot of resources, and so like all the other diet experiences, there was a lot of like ups and downs, just trying to figure it out. And there was a few forums talking about it, a few people talking about it, but yeah, so kind of figured things out the hard way.
Well, let me ask you a question with that. Like, what kind of resources do you need? I mean, I can't like just thinking about it. Like, eat red meat. Okay, well, there's like a million varieties of that. Like, what kind of resources would you think that you would need?
Yeah, so I would say like when I first got into it, it was just like, okay, red meat. Like I wasn't even much of a cook, so I was like, how do I like what are all the varieties? Like I didn't know the difference between a ribeye steak and a New York steak, or like ground beef, or even what a chuck roast or chuck steak was at the time. I just really didn't know much.
Yeah.
I'd cooked a few things at home, but like I didn't know much. And so it was like, like what do I eat? Do I just eat like all beef? And can I just eat ground beef and that's it? Like, is that good enough?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. And at the time I was on a very, very small budget, relatively speaking. Like I was like trying to make it work on about $10 a day. So for me, I started out basically just eating whatever meats were on sale and ground beef.
You got that Taco Bell ground beef that's that dog food equivalent.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so, so just, learn things the hard way. Like, there's like such a thing as like what the Native Americans used to call like rabbit starvation, which is basically what people would experience if they were living off just rabbit because the meat was too lean. It didn't have enough fat in it. So people would get sick. And so, like I figured that out the hard way. I was just eating like too high of protein, not of fat. And you just get like, I don't know. It's weird. There's this whole rabbit hole of things that we can go down. But generally speaking, learned it all the hard way, have, since been doing it 7 years, learned a lot and just have like, experienced like the extremes of all sides of like feeling my worst in my life to feeling the absolute best in my life, better than I ever felt even as a kid. Like it just totally unlocked my entire existence. Honestly, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for this. And it's not just because I started this whole like meat powered brand and movement and social media or whatever, but like physically, I just like I didn't have the brain capacity or drive or ability to just perform. So yeah, it's been a game changer for me, and yeah,
Yeah,
that's
you
why.
So
mentioned. Oh,
you say 7 years. Has that been like constant 7 years, or during kind of holidays, do you indulge a little bit more, maybe have piece of pie or stuff like that, or do you feel
Yeah.
like you kind of have to have all or nothing?
Yeah, so that's kind of why I'm here because like the videos that I made that you guys ended up seeing, they kind of went viral a little bit. That stemmed from me like kind of going off track again, like in the holidays, having a few things
Yep.
and just not feeling very good. All the sort of symptoms I used to deal with came back, digestive issues, just feeling, crummy, low energy, bloating, like no motivation, all that nasty stuff that, it's just not a fun way to live. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to get back on track, that whole thing. And I'm going to post it online because I've had like a dream of helping people with this kind of stuff for a long time. And yeah, so I shared like, my journey of like a 30-day challenge of just getting back on track and getting my energy back, the bloating down, energy up, all that stuff. And yeah, so I would say that like I can get away with things today that like I couldn't when I first started. For example, like 7 years ago, I was so unhealthy that I had to do the most strict version of this diet, which is just beef, salt, and water, and nothing else. Um, and it's really because like my system couldn't handle anything else. And there was just so much healing that needed to occur. I was so sensitive to like anything. Like I couldn't have like black pepper seasonings. I reacted poorly to pork, and all this through experimentation, by the way. But yeah, it turns out there's a huge, and you've probably heard of the carnivore a little bit because the carnivore diet a little bit because it's kind of gotten popular over the last few years in some circles. I know, like like Joe Rogan's talked about it a number of times on his podcast, and I think he does it every January if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, we just had a guy on yesterday that was talking about he does the meat diet as well.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
And pretty much we're the same as Joe Rogan, so I mean that's pretty much on par.
Yeah. So it's making its rounds, which is great. And so it's not so weird to be talking about it now, but it's certainly weird to like try it out and like go against everything you thought you knew about nutrition. So there's a learning curve and all that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it seems like today too that there's so much confusion around what like the nutrition actually should be. That you have this food triangle. It seemed like it's constantly changing, and
Didn't they change it recently so that like what was it, like Fruity Pebbles or something like that, or Fruit Loops is like higher than eggs on the food pyramid as like healthiness or something?
Yeah,
crazy
well,
like that?
yeah, it's this whole thing like in schools, right? Ketchup was considered a vegetable.
Right.
It's like, dude, what
high
the
fructose
heck
corn
are you
syrup and red food coloring.
Yeah, and so I know at the beginning you'd kind of said, you started by humble means, right? Trying to just make it happen with whatever you had. But if someone is interested in starting this lifestyle, where would they start? I mean, I know you said there's like a couple in your social medias. You've kind of talked about a couple different levels of carnivore. Maybe explain a couple of the different levels, and I know you said you started maybe at level 1, which is kind of meat, salt, and water, but
Yeah. So I broke it down into levels because there's all these different camps in the carnivore community right now that have kind of spawned over the last 2 years. So yeah, I try to make it as simple and as approachable as possible to just give people, the knowledge and then have them be aware that there's options for them.
Yeah.
There's some, just like anything, there's a lot of dogma over here and ways of doing things over there that like don't, mesh well. And so there's infighting even between the carnivore groups. It's crazy, but that's just how we work as humans. So yeah, so I tried to break it down and just include all of those into the 3 levels that I designed. So I started level 1 because that's kind of like, you can look at it like a video game or something. Like you're just starting at level 1 as the baseline. And that's just made up of, the most nutrient rich, nutrient dense foods on the planet that are consistent with all diets throughout time, like all ancestral diets from around the world, sort of incorporates all those sorts of foods, with a focus on animal foods, primarily, meats, organ meats, broth, dairy, if you tolerate it. Those kinds of things kind of make up the base of it. And then if you handle fruits and veggies and they're fine for you, great, do that. Herbs and spices, all those good things. If that works for you, that's great. So that's kind of the baseline, level one. And then level two is like, now it's where you're trying to figure out like, oh, maybe I have some, sort of allergy or reaction or buildup in my system or something going on that's like causing maybe some joint pain or some digestive issues or brain fog or something that like I want to figure out. Then you can start eliminating like the most common things that people learn on the carnivore diet that they actually do have issues with that they never knew. And so those tend to be things like, basically anything from the plant family, like any plants, we eliminate those, and dairy and eggs, and you just go to all meats. So beef, pork, chicken, fish, all that good stuff. And then level three from there is just like, okay, some people react to fish, some people react to pork. So beef, salt water is like the most extreme version. And you'll see people doing that that have like autoimmune issues and stuff, like real problems where it's like they can't handle anything else. And some of the more like well-known figures in the, media and podcasting space would be people doing that, like Jordan Peterson. He does that for his autoimmune issues. So does his daughter, Michaela Peterson. And yeah, so there's a number of people doing that kind of need to, and every time they go off of it, they just, have like really severe reactions and stuff. So I designed that system to like just basically give people an idea of what it would look like. So you could start, say, at level one and just introduce like more nutrient rich, nutrient dense foods, meats and broths and organs and all that good stuff that humans have traditionally eaten, for a very long time, that kind of have got lost in the last, call it 100, 200 years, especially.
Which organs would you suggest at this level?
Yeah, so the one that gets the most attention is liver. And that's because it's pretty much the most nutrient dense food on the planet. Like it, and this is the kind of thing where like some people argue against, because they'll look at like plants and all these other things, but it's like, it's just numbers, like how many vitamins, how many, whatever you want to count per gram does this substance have? Mm-hmm. And liver's at the top of the list, and so at least for things that are important to us. I mean, it doesn't have petroleum in it or anything else that's important for other resources. But it's got a lot of good stuff in it for us humans. So much so, in fact, that you can have too much of it and end up with what's called hypervitaminosis, because there's too many vitamins. It's that's dense.
What happened to the Liver King, right? He just got hyper vitaminosis.
Yeah.
That explains everything.
Injecting raw liver into what he's doing.
Right. So liver, like it's so great. You don't even need that much. Like most people can eat it once or twice a week and get their filling. It's got the kind of stuff in it that, like your body can store and utilize over time. So liver is, great. As far as flavor goes, liver is definitely not on the top of the list. Most people don't really like it that much. And if you're thinking about flavor, calf's liver is more mild, so you can start there. But if you want to try an organ meat that tastes great, and it has great health benefits, in my experience anyway, is just heart. It's another muscle meat, just like all the other meats you're used to eating. But it's just, it's got more nutrients in it. So it's got a more mild flavor, something you'd be a little more familiar with. It's a little tougher. In fact, that's kind of how it works with the animals. Like the more the muscle gets used, like the tougher it usually is, which is why like a ribeye is like in the center of the, the cow or whatever animal. And it doesn't get a lot of like flex and movement or whatever. And so it's just kind of a nice tender piece of meat. a lot of fat on it. And then as you get closer to like, the legs and, the chest and all that kind of stuff, whatever, a lot of movement, it tends to get a little more tough. So yeah, obviously the heart is pumping all the time. So it's, it's a pretty hearty meat.
Or
But
the
it
tongue.
tastes
The
good.
tongue as well is huge
Yeah.
in Mexico. They eat lengua all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's got a great flavor. It's high in fat content, surprisingly. So yeah, that's a good one. And it's like it's another one of those things where it's like, how deep do you want to go? Because there's you can eat anything. Everything on the animal is basically edible, and so there's this whole concept that goes back thousands of years, and you might call it organotherapy or like supports like. But it's this practice where, if you have a weak organ, say a heart or anything else, you would eat the healthy version of that from an animal, and it would strengthen the corresponding tissue in your own body. And so, like, yeah, it's a fascinating topic that, like, that I love and I'm currently like writing about. But
Isn't eating like brain? I've heard that eating brain is like it has lots of dangers in it. They're like, I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
there's definitely like sort of
I never kidneys as
yeah.
well. I've never heard of eating kidneys.
Yeah, so brain gets like special attention because of like mad cow disease, like prion diseases and stuff, which are definitely like something to be aware of. So if you source brain, you just want to be sure that it comes from a good source. But um, yeah, there's ways to do it, and it can be safe. So yeah, I mean, there's ways to do brain, and it is, it's got it's weird, but it's like, I don't know, kind of look at it like this. Like, if you have, I don't know, kidney failure and you go to the doctor and they're like, oh man, we need to operate on you right away. They're not gonna like bring you into the operating room, cut you open, and like replace your kidney with like a bunch of kale. Like, they're going to take another kidney, and a healthy kidney. So it's not that crazy to think that maybe those tissues would have good, nutrients
Yeah.
and supportive,
Yeah.
compounds in it for that respective tissue in your body. But of course, it's more complex than that. Your body, when you eat something, it does break it down into its, constituents, all that stuff, all the little pieces, re-put, all that stuff, puts it back together in just the right way to utilize it for your own body. But
Yeah.
yeah, these foods for me have been a game changer. So like, my favorites are liver, heart, bone marrow. Bone marrow is a big one that like, there's something weird about bone marrow for me personally. I've heard other people talk about this too, where it just makes me feel better, and it's hard to describe. But my brain works better, my mood is better, everything's better when I have a little bone marrow in my diet. So
Is that
yeah.
maybe because it's fatty, or I don't know, is bone marrow fatty? I don't know.
Yeah, so yeah, it's definitely fatty. It has collagen in it. It's got a little bit of everything, and then it's got all the blood cells in it. It's got so much in it, and I would love to give you all the technical details, but obviously I'm not a doctor, so I
Yeah.
don't really want to step out of my whatever comfort zone, or not even that, but just like, I don't want to come across as like the authority on all these
Yeah.
different compounds that it might have. Um, but I just speak from personal experience, and then like what history has taught us, that like, these foods are just so nourishing and consistent with everything we've done for thousands of years. It's just kind of unfortunately been lost in the last 100, 200 years,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
ever tried Rocky Mountain oysters?
Yeah, so I was wondering if I should mention or not, because it's always such a weird topic for people, including myself. But it's actually one of the most game-changing organs I consume.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell us
Yeah.
about the benefits of that. Did you notice a
Yeah.
difference in like versus like?
Yeah. So
Did your wife notice a difference?
yeah. No, I mean, it's weird, but it works. It's like, consuming testicles, like, it took me a long time to come around to it.
Yeah.
And there was definitely people in the carnivore community that talk about it, where they're like, you don't need organs, you don't need any of that other stuff. And they're right, you don't need anything.
Yeah.
But it has helped me a lot, and it certainly seems to help a lot of other people.
Hmm.
So yeah, so for like testicles, like, it does all the things you kind of would think it would do. It improves just like the male function. You feel better. You get up with more energy. Your workouts are better. Your drive is better. Motivation, like all of it, just gets better. So yeah.
So
It
do
was
you
interesting.
do you I know a lot of times people will say when you cook meat it loses some of that nutritional value. Do you always cook your meat or do you ever eat things raw?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I first started, I didn't like the taste of like raw meat, rare meat. I always cooked it like medium rare or medium. And over the years, I almost prefer it like raw or like as rare as it gets. And that's interesting to me. And I think that's probably because my body, is just adapting and picking up on it. Um, but there's an interesting story on this. Like to cut it short, basically like Westerners came over to North America, and at a time they were with the Inuit up north in the cold, and living on. And Inuit are well known for just basically living on mostly meat before we came over here and started trading with them and changing things. But um, the Westerners were used to cooking their meat, and the Inuit would cook it a little less or not at all. And the Westerners ended up with issues like scurvy and stuff, whereas the Inuit didn't. And it turns out that like meats have trace amounts of vitamin C and other things in it that get degraded with heat. So it's like this balance, right? Where, cooking meat can make it more digestible in certain circumstances, but it also ruins enzymes and other things that help with digestion. So I think there's a reason why you kind of see people having a range of cooked meat where it's like seared on the outside, but you still have it a little red on the inside. I think there's something to that. And then, yeah, so like vitamin C, vitamin B6, for example, they degrade under heat pretty quickly, from what I recall. So there's definitely a lot of that.
So how do you?
To
So how do you get? That was one of the questions that I had specifically about scurvy. Back in like those times, people were on ships and stuff. They didn't have anything but meat and like they have any vegetables or fruit or anything like that, so they couldn't get that vitamin C.
Right.
So how do you get that or your vitamin C? Do you get it through meats or do you supplement somehow or?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that was one of the things I was worried about when I first started too. I was like, oh man, am I gonna get scurvy and like my gums are gonna bleed and I get sick and this whole thing. Uh, yeah, in my 7 years, I haven't seen like anyone directly get scurvy on the carnivore diet, but I know that it can happen. There's people way into this that write about it extensively on like maybe why that is. And certainly what I was just talking about, like there's trace amounts of vitamin C in meat. So as long as you don't cook it, you'll probably get enough. Um, um, so, yeah, like if you're worried about it though, I mean, vitamin C, it's pretty easy to get. You don't need that much. The reason that like it used to be such a problem and you hear about it through history and stuff is like there's all this stuff that gets technical, like carbohydrates apparently compete with vitamin C uptake, and so if you're on a high carb diet, you're going to need more vitamin C to begin with, and all that stuff. So yeah, I would say like if you're eating just meat, just make sure you don't cook it all the way through. Probably going to be fine. You can eat meats that are higher in vitamin C. There are certain meats. I don't want to say them off the top of my head because I think I'm right, but I don't want to give someone the wrong impression. But there are meats that have a little more vitamin C in it than others that you can get.
Now, when you
and
say
then if you're not eating just meat, just get a little fruit here and there, and you'll be totally fine.
yeah, now, one thing you mentioned earlier was about this, and actually you talked about not getting enough fat. In fact, there was an episode of the show Alone. I don't know if you've ever seen that show.
No, I haven't seen it.
It's where these people go out in the woods and they have to survive alone, and whoever survives the longest wins. And so this one guy went out there and he shot a moose, and he got all the moose meat. And I think it was this one, but like he put all the fat into like a tin can that he had found. And a bear came and ate the tin can, all that fat, so he couldn't get enough fat, and it was just that meat, and he basically wasted away, even though he had a ton of meat.
Right.
I think they medically tapped him out because he was losing too much weight, and he didn't have enough fat to kind of sustain him. So you were talking earlier about the different cuts of meat with the carnivore diet. Do you like eat a variety of different cuts that do different things, and like what would that variety be?
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess first to say real quick, if anybody's thinking about like, oh, am I going to have enough fat? Like, I need to think about that. Roughly, like, if you think about ground beef, for example, 80% ground beef, when you buy at the store, it'll say like 70%, 80%, 95%, whatever. That's the fat content or the lean to fat ratio. If you get 80% meat, as long as you don't like overcook it and have all the fat drip off into the pan or into the barbecue, you'll have enough fat there in that kind of meat. And then like a ribeye, for example, is you'll see that very popular like in the long-term carnivore diet. People like they'll basically go on just ribeyes because it's like the perfect ratio of fat to protein, and it basically turns out it's roughly 70% calories from fat, 30% calories from protein. Um, and that generally tends to be like the sweet spot for most people on carnivore, and even on like the keto diet it could be considered keto if you're around those ranges. um, yeah, so that's probably helpful for anybody listening to this that's interested. Yeah, just making sure you get enough fat. You could do it that way. If you're eating the leaner cuts, um, whether it's like top round, bottom round, they'll call it London broil, things like that, that are a little tougher. You can just get you can add a little fat to it. If you tolerate dairy, you can, throw in some butter or whatever, cheese, whatever you tolerate. I made a, food list of things to like cover those sorts of, requirements or whatever, give you like a safe food list to use if you're doing this way of eating. Like for example, when I was on a really tight budget at one point, I was eating a lot of cheap lean meat and it didn't have fat on it. I couldn't really afford ribeyes. So I would get fat trimmings from the butcher, and a lot of time they'll just give them to you for free because they're throwing them away. Um, and then I would get like suet, which is the fat around the kidney section of the animal. And that's like, it's a slightly different composition that makes for a great fat. And so I was living for a while there. I basically did it for like 6 months where I was eating lean meats and suet, and I felt amazing. So that can be done, and suet's pretty cheap. You can get it for like, I don't know, a couple bucks or $5 a pound or something, and it goes a long way because it's very dense. It's just pure fat. So, yeah. So, anyways, I'm sorry. What was the other?
No,
the variety.
Yeah.
So, like, I think that. Yeah. So it depends. Like if you're doing like straight up carnivore, like strict, where you're not eating anything else, people tend to just stick to like beef or what's called other ruminant animals. And ruminant is just like a description of the way that, their digestive system works. Like you think about ruminating on something, you just stand around eating,
Chewing
walk
it.
to the next spot,
Yeah.
So they have a rumen and whatever. Anyways, ruminant animals like, cow or deer, venison, elk, lamb, things like that, tend to be the staples in a carnivore diet just because of the way the fat content, is and that kind of thing. But if you're eating a variety of foods, and even if you're on carnivore, I think there's a lot of benefits to having some other foods. I'm a big fan of salmon and oysters. Good pork, if you can get it. Pasture-raised pork is excellent. Everybody loves bacon, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you have like, if you eat meat, so like walk us through like what your breakfast, lunch, and dinner would look like?
Yeah.
And if you can, how many calories a day are you eating just like regularly?
Yeah, well, I guess that's why I hesitate a little bit, just because it's so hard to say like what one day looks like. Because when I'm doing like a level 3, like strict meat only, I'll eat red meat and fat whenever I'm hungry, because your body gets into a different place where it's like you're not really hungry ever, which I know sounds crazy. And believe me, when I first started this, all this stuff sounded crazy. But at the time, like I couldn't even go like an hour or two without a snack or food or something. I was like always starving, always needed something, always had like these, ups and downs in my energy level and stuff. And then like, after months and all this stuff of adaptation, you just get in tune with your body in a way that's like I never had before. So on carnivore, the general rule is when you make the transition, you kind of have to eat a lot because your body's going through all these changes. You need to keep it fed, and you might be dealing with sugar cravings or whatever. So you just eat and you don't hold back. But over time, your body gets used to like what you need. And so like these days, I'll range anywhere between like a 1,500 and a 3,500 calorie intake for the day. Because some days I'll just eat a lot, and then I'll wake up and I'm like, I don't need food, and I may not eat till the next night. So like 24-hour fasts are they just kind of happen naturally on this diet over time. Um, and that's very common, with others in the community. So yeah, it just depends. But like, for example, if I'm like, I don't know, I have like some goals that I'm trying to hit, like working out or whatever, and I'll have like an intake that I want to hit. There are certain limitations to all of us. Like some people just can't eat that much all in one meal.
Yeah.
And so you need to take that into consideration. So sometimes I'll eat like more meals spaced out throughout the day to try and like, get more in or whatever. So yeah, I mean, generally speaking, my diet consists of mostly, meats, animal foods, a little fruit and veggie, like as I'm experimenting or trying things. Most of the time I don't have them, or I'll have very little of it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's kind of, a whole separate topic, but like, we had our first kid a couple years ago, and when I was carnivore, I'm like, oh yeah, all you need is meat and nothing else. It's fine. And it's like, well, it doesn't really work that way for babies. Like they can eat milk, but they can't eat meat right away.
Yeah.
And so like, what does that transition look like? And so there's an amazing anthropologist that I love the work of that basically describes this concept, where he makes the argument that the human digestive system is so bad compared to like every other animal that it's like it's pathetic. We've basically outsourced all of our digestion to the outside world in preparation and all this stuff, and then like we just eat the most nutrient dense, most easily digestible foods that we can to feed our big brain, in our other efforts.
Yeah.
Because our brains are so expensive relative to everything else, and all that. So he makes the argument that like the human digestive system is really only properly designed to eat one food, and that's mother's milk. And everything else after that is like, an adaptation. You need to prepare it and do all these things for it. So anyways, yeah, again, that's like a whole rabbit hole, but how you get like babies fed and how you get them onto new foods and like when their digestive enzymes pick up for certain foods is a fascinating topic. Yeah.
So you being a family man, do you find it hard to stay on this carnivore diet? Is this something that you're doing by yourself, or does your family do it as well?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, great question. Yeah, when I first started, it was definitely just me, and everybody thought I was crazy. So like, the Thanksgivings and stuff were awkward.
Just eating turkey.
What's that?
You're just eating the turkey.
Yeah, I was just eating the turkey. No gravy, no nothing. I mean, everybody was like, "What? You're gonna die. Like that's not a good idea."
Your dad pulls you aside, son. We need to have a talk.
Right. So yeah. But over the years, it's like, and I think that's what's so powerful about the carnivore, movement is that like it's not like a theory and then like you hope it works or whatever. Like it's come out here in the last few years because it's results driven. Like people are doing it and it's working in spite of everything you've probably heard, growing up and everything in the time that we're living in. And by the way, meat has not been bad throughout all of history. Most of it's been, prized and all that. But in recent times, it's kind of gotten a bad name. Yeah, so over time, as the results worked for me and people were kind of seeing it and wondering about it, like family members started trying it. Not everybody, but like my wife, for example, tried it and got in great shape. Lost some weight that she wanted to get rid of, and had great results. And so, and she never did like the full beef salt water version. She always kept her coffee with cream in her diet, and basically did carnivore outside of that. And that's what she did. And she'll add foods in now and experiment or whatever. Father-in-law did it, had great results, lost a bunch of weight, is still doing it. So, yeah.
That's
That's
cool.
awesome.
So do you have like a super nice grill out back where you smoke all your meats and stuff?
I don't. It's funny. Like,
Wow, that's surprising.
yeah,
I figured you'd be
I know.
a meat chef master at this point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's on my list. I'll probably get something set up this summer. But no, I had a barbecue, but I actually, it just kind of got worn down outside or whatever, stopped using it about a year ago. Everything I've been doing is mostly in the oven or on the pan. And honestly, you end up cooking so much meat with this way of eating that you're just like, whatever, just all right, I'm ready to eat,
Yeah.
sear, and you're good. These days I do tend to like make, meals a little more fun. And you might see that in some of my content or whatever. Like I do like to, make some good meals. So like a T-bone or, a tomahawk, that's always fun. And preparing them in different ways. Um,
Well, I would think
yeah,
that you would like make make a big batch at the beginning of the week. Like you would smoke a bunch of T-bone steaks, ribeyes, ribs,
right.
whatever you want on the grill, and then you'd just put it all in the fridge and then you eat it throughout the week when you're hungry. I mean, that would probably be the easiest meal prep, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the easiest way to do it. And I did do that a lot at first. I think that personally I got away from that because there's always like nuances to it. So like meat that's been cooked a long time or stored for a long time builds up what's called histamine. And so, like you've heard of histamine because you'll take antihistamines for like allergies and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, so at one point on the carnivore diet, I had like a pretty high histamine intolerance. So I could really only eat like fresh meat. If I ate like older meats, meats that have been in the fridge for a while, I just would get like really tired and
How
like
long
have
is
to
a
get.
while? Do you think like a week or like longer than 2 days or what?
Yeah. So I mean, at the worst, like years ago, my histamine intolerance was so high that like basically I just had to eat like fresh meat and nothing like left over that for a
Oh,
night
wow.
or whatever. Yeah. It was bad, but like that's a nuance that like not everybody experiences,
Yeah.
but it can be something of note that like if you find yourself tired and you're eating leftovers, you might have a histamine intolerance. Yeah. So
Interesting.
I got away from it then, and I just kind of got used to eating, fresh meat as often as possible now. Yeah.
Just cooking as you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And today I do eat leftovers. Don't get me wrong. I don't tend to cook them in bulk anymore. Yeah.
So, another question is, we're talking about a lot of different cuts and a lot of different meat, and even kind of your progress of over the past years being, going from kind of just cheap ground beef to ribeyes and tomahawks, which is a
Yeah.
little bit more pricey.
Yeah.
Where do you get your meat from? Is there any place do you have a specific butcher, or do you go to, the
Costco and
grocery
buy in
store,
bulk.
or, yeah, Costco
Yeah.
or Walmart? Are there places that you stay away from? Are there certain cuts? I know there's like, prime or different things like that. Are there certain cuts that you stick with, or tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
your how and where you get you select your meat from.
Yeah, great question. So when I started and I realized that like, oh, I'm gonna keep doing this for a while, so I better figure this out. I bought a freezer big enough for a full steer,
Oh, cool.
which is so like 400 pounds I can fit in the garage. And so I was doing that. I started buying. I think my first bulk purchase was a quarter steer, quarter cow, whatever you want to call it. Then a half, then a full. Now, so I was doing that for a while, sourcing it locally. And so you can really save by doing that. So I would recommend like if you're doing this, like buying in bulk is a great option. Um, and then you can like I don't know. So there's this whole thing with like what kind of quality are you getting and that whole topic. So just real quick on it, like most of the meat that you buy in the grocery store is grass fed and grain finished. And then you'll see, as you're probably well aware of, that there's grass finished or 100% grass fed meat they'll advertise in the stores as well. And it'll typically have like a little bit of a different taste and texture. And it's usually more expensive. Um, and so I guess I'm trying to keep it short without going into all the details, but yeah, basically most meat is grown, it's raised, and in the last 90 days or more, they fatten them up before slaughter. And what they fatten them up with is a bunch of, fattening foods like corn and soy and all this stuff. Um, and so that makes the production, more efficient, cheaper, that whole thing, fattier meat content, fattier meat. So, there's more marbling, that whole thing. So a lot of people like and prefer that kind of meat. Um, and then, when you look at like grass finished meat, and there is a distinction there. So there's grass fed meat is unfortunately like kind of thrown around a lot, but like everything qualifies as grass fed meat because all cows eat grass. So the distinction
It depends on the finishing.
exactly. So grass finished is where it makes the big difference. And I don't even think they have to be grass finished in order to claim 100% grass fed. They can say 100% grass fed, I'm pretty sure, without being 100% grass finished. At least last I looked, was a while ago now. I don't know if anything's changed. So anyways, you know what you get when you go to, an actual ranch or farm, especially if it's local or whatever, or, get it online from a reputable source. And then you can get, grass finished if that's what you're after.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that, on the carnivore diet, I became like hyper aware of the different tastes and textures of the meat. And I felt significantly better health wise, energy, and all that, eating just grass fed, grass finished meats. And I don't feel as good as eating the grain finished meats. But that's not to say that everybody will feel that way. So everybody's a little different. But yeah, I just want to I kind of wanted to let your viewers know, or you guys know, that there's a little bit of a distinction there. But to this day, like I'll still eat like, a wide range. So it's like if we're looking to save, a little bit of money and just go get some meat for the weekend or whatever, we're happy to go to Costco and get some meat there. They always have a good, good cut of meat that's grass fed, grain finished, and that's fine. But I would say the majority of the meat that I eat is grass fed, grass finished, and I like to source it. There's a local ranch here in California, in Northern California, that I've bought from a long time, called Stemple Creek. And there's another one that I just got some meat from that's awesome. They're down in Southern Cal, and they're partnering with others across the states. They're called Perennial Pastures. Excellent meat.
And they mail it. They mail it to you or something, like in a freezer box, like a ice chest.
Yeah, in a freezer box. Yeah.
Cool.
In fact, when I first started all this, I did the sort of biggest name in the space, which is Butcher Box.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big name out there, and like so I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so yeah, I did Butcher Box for a while. So and that's what's so cool about today. Like you can go online and you can order meat from almost anywhere. It's incredible. Yeah. So yeah,
that's cool. So I want to make sure we talk about like what are the benefits. I know you kind of touched on this here and there throughout our conversation, but maybe you could talk more directly about like what benefits have you seen from doing this type of diet.
Yeah. So it's one of those weird things where it's like some of it's like it's like the list is so long, it sounds like it can't be true or whatever, but like literally the benefits for me have been like, I'll tell you, like I don't even know where to start, honestly. Like, so I grew up, always had digestive issues, always had issues like putting on weight, was always skinny, that whole thing. And so like immediately, like I could like I could put on weight, and my digestion, it took a while, but it like got to a point where I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to be normal. Like this is just like in no pain. I'd never experienced it before. So digestion, it was a complete game changer. Energy just like it's a different energy. So good, clean, motivated, like stable energy that like doesn't really go up or down. Which is and just at a higher level overall as a baseline, um, which is really cool. And then like as far as mental goes too, like I don't know, I was always a kid that like struggled in school and like didn't have the patience for it or whatever. And then like um, I just found on this diet that like like normally what I would read or whatever I'd forget the next day. Like I could just remember more things and I was sharper. I could, like communicate better. So like just my brain was just working on another level. Um, Weird things like I used to sunburn within like 15 minutes of being outside.
Hmm.
And like now I don't sunburn. And when I do, it takes like over an hour and it heals the next day. It's crazy. Um,
Hmm.
and that comes back, by the way, my sunburn stuff, as soon as I have like plants, depending on the type and how much, that sort of like baseline inflammation comes back. It's weird stuff. My smell got better, vision got better, sleep got better over time. Like everything imaginable basically got better. And so yeah, and then like whenever I like veer off of it a little bit, um, it tends to like go the other way where I get a little slower, get a little more lethargic, maybe get some digestive issues, that kind of thing. Yeah.
You mentioned brain fog. Can you help us understand? A lot of people talk about brain fog. What is brain fog?
Man, I heard this term so many times going into this and never understood it.
Exactly.
Like until I didn't have it. And so, and maybe you don't have it. So I'm not saying that that's the case for you, but like, yeah, it's like, I don't know. It's like when you grab a book and you go to read it and you just like can't focus. You're like, I can't read this. It's not, my brain doesn't want to do this.
Yeah.
And it's something that you actually do want to do. You just can't at the moment, maybe. It's kind of like that goes away. Your brain's just like, oh, everything makes sense. Oh, I understand what he said. Oh, I understand what she said. I remember what he said. I remember what she said. And you can recall those things and like everything's just working properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
That's
it's the only time I've ever tried to describe it, but that's how I would do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can definitely remember some times when I'm just having a conversation with someone and I'm like, what did you even say? Like, or I think I feel like I have that fog, or like I'm at work and I'm just like out, I'm just like zoned out. I'm just like, man, I don't want to be here.
Yeah. It's like that it's like that carb hangover, like that heavy Thanksgiving dinner where you're just like, you want to take a nap.
Yeah.
You don't want to do anything. I guess that's another way to look at it. Yeah.
But there's also been a couple times where I'll have, like, even at work or something like that, like you'll just feel like you're just on, right? You just feel like you're hitting all these words and it's there and you're just on top of it, and it's almost like you can think faster than you can speak, and everything's just prepared. I've been in that situation before, and then I walk out of a meeting or a presentation, I'm like, dude, where did that come from? It just felt like I was just on
in your flow state. Yeah.
boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And I guess I never really attributed that to maybe a diet or something that I specifically ate, or there's probably some self-confidence and stuff in there as well. But yeah, you could definitely kind of feel when you're feeling a little foggy and you can't quite grasp that next word. Today I think I had like 4 Rice Krispie treats and 2 fruit roll-ups and everything else. So it's just like, yeah, I can definitely see how that would be beneficial. Even just taking anything that's like these, everything is so preserved nowadays. Just taking all these preservatives out of your life and just getting more down to the basics is just beneficial.
Yeah. And like, just for the brain fog thing, like I was at a point where I was like always in that state, even no matter what I ate. Like I was eating healthy, so to speak, and I was still feeling that way. So that's why I got to a place where it's like I ended up doing something such as so extreme as like carnivore, like beef, salt, water. Um, and it just happened to open up these doors that I'd never opened before. And I was like, oh, this is what life can truly be like, you know? And yeah, so back to like your point with like processed foods and stuff, like most people, you'll experience like the majority of the benefits by just eliminating those kinds of foods from your diet. You know, like you don't have to go full crazy carnivore, but you can include more of these, you know, nutrient rich foods like meats and good fats and maybe dairy if you tolerate it, the organ meats every now and then. And it can be a game changer, you know? So, yeah, that's what I would say. And I think that, you know, that's kind of what I'm trying to do with like my brand is present it in a way that's like, you know, it's fun to eat healthy and eat good. Um, and, uh, and if you want to like figure out if you have like sensitivities or other issues and stuff, like this is a path you could take. You could try this out. You could do like carnivore for 5 days, 10 days, 30 days or whatever. And there are people in the community that'll say like, you experience all the benefits really like 4, 6, 8 weeks into it, and you kind of have to ride it out. And unfortunately, largely that is true. So I'm trying to figure out how to navigate that. Like, I don't want to force anybody or tell anybody they got to do it a certain way, but there are some interesting benefits that come only with time as your body adjusts. Because, you know, coming from a regular diet, you've never just run off, you know, meat and fat and nothing else. And so there's a lot of stuff that happens to adjust to that. And I like to think of the story of like this Arctic explorer, Willem Stephenson, if I'm saying his name right, 100 years ago. He spent a lot of time with the Inuit, and he would take guys with him on some of his trips where he'd live with them for months or years at a time. And he described this where it's like anybody that he took with him from, you know, the Eastern United States or whatever, over into, you know, Northern Canada, to live with the Inuit, if they went with him on a short trip, like less than 6 months, basically none of them wanted to go do it again. It was like a miserable experience. They didn't like the food, blah, blah, blah. But if they got over the 6 month mark, they were like, oh, I could do that again. And that tends to be what happens like in the hardcore carnivore community, where it's like you hit the 6 month mark and just something different happens. And some people, it only takes a month or two, depending on your health or whatever, and some people longer. But for me personally, that's basically what happened. By like month, like 5 and 6, I got to another level that I had never experienced before. And so I know that like if things get really out of whack and I need to go back to a healthy baseline and get to my best, I know what path to take, you know?
Yeah. Interesting.
So your brand is MeatPowered, right? Maybe where can our listeners find you? And then as well, kind of what are you trying to do with that?
Yeah. So on all of the major platforms like TikTok and Instagram, Facebook, even YouTube, I'm on there a little bit. It's just MeatPowered, at MeatPowered. And like right now, I'm just making short videos, trying to make as much content as I can. You know, writing guides and, you know, like meal plans, coming up, all that stuff, sort of building a community around it. Yeah. And then as far as like my vision for it goes, like it's, so I have a lot to say. And since I don't talk about it too regularly, I don't know how to keep it short, but, like, just, I don't know, like, so
you're wanting to make a positive impact in people's lives through from what I see and kind of what, and maybe we can lead this into our final question as well, right? Is that you have had all of these amazing experiences and you have gone on this journey in your life over the past, you know, 7+ years of figuring out something that has made you feel amazing. And we had somebody on the podcast one time that he said a really interesting thing, and he was like, you know, there is nothing that feels better than helping people and getting paid to do it, right? And so it was just really kind of cool. And so maybe what I'll do is we'll kind of link that question with our final question, which is kind of around your personal creed. We always ask our guests around about their own personal creed. And a creed obviously can be really long and big and planned out, or it can be something that we're still developing. I think we're all kind of trying to develop our creed. So creed is a set of beliefs or principles that help to guide our day-to-day actions. It can be a mantra, a quote, a scripture, a philosophy, or whatever it may be. But we would love to hear from you a little bit about your personal creed, and then maybe how that ties into kind of your branding and Meat Powered
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
your vision.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I will make it a little bit longer if you don't mind, just
That's
because
okay. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it is a work in progress. So one of the things that stuck out to me and something I learned in the last few years was about the grant study done at Harvard that's like still going on to this day. It's been going on for about 80 years. And they've studied these people all, this entire time throughout their lives and tried to figure out, like sort of, just interesting things like what makes someone successful, not so successful, anything and everything you could learn from these people by surveying them over these, regularly over these years. And they even survey the children and then grandchildren as well, as much as they can. And the biggest thing that stuck out to me was the researchers described that the biggest predictor or I don't know if predictor is the right way to say it, but the thing that determined the best or the thing that affected the best outcome for for kids later in life was like not where they were born, the family they were born into, the money, the job they even, ended up getting or whatever, or school that they went to. None of that stuff that you might think. The number one thing was growing up in a warm household. So the way the researchers described a warm household is that it didn't even have to be a parent. It could have been a caretaker, a grandmother, anybody that just created that sort of warm environment. And and so I thought, like, well, okay, like in order to make the biggest change in the world, then to get the best outcomes for the future generations, if you could make as many warm households as possible, you'd be off to a pretty good start. So I kind of like had that idea in my head for a number of years and try to figure out like how I can make an impact at the biggest scale possible. Because like, why not just go for it,
Yeah.
And I realized over the last few months and years thinking about this, like what I want to do, that like I'm at my best and I create a warm household when I'm at my best, and it just so happens that like it's like directly related to what I'm eating. Like it makes all the difference for me, and it tends to make a big difference for many other people, And so, this way of this lifestyle that I live, it works for me. And like every time, like I kind of like, for example, when I go off the rails a little bit and have some food at the holidays, I may be tired, so I'm not as patient, with my family as I could be. I'm not as energetic, as I could be. I'm not motivating. I'm not like waking up saying, okay, let's go have some fun today. Any of those kinds, all those things that you want to be as, a better person, a better father, husband, whatever. And so, yeah, I was like, well, every time I'm doing what I need to do to be the best version of me, it creates a warmer household here. So, maybe I can share that with others. And so I've like found a way to communicate that through this, wild and crazy brand called MeatPowered. That's like, it's a little over the top in its naming, and it's like it's kind of like, whatever. But like that's also kind of what I want to bring to the world is more energy, more fun, like, and basically get people into like what I'm thinking is more of like the prime of their life. Like, you see athletes, they're typically in the prime of their life in like their, 30s or so, give or take, depending on the sport. But it's like I'm in my late 30s now and I feel better than I ever did in my 20s. And I plan to continuously feel better and better over time and stay in my prime.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I'm kind of playing with that idea that like that's like my mission, like to help people get into their prime and stay there. Because then you're a better version of yourself. The whole world gets better, etc. So yeah, I would say like that's basically where I'm coming from.
I love that, man. I think like that's right in line with what Ethan and I are trying to do with this podcast. Is help people build their personal creeds to live principled lives, and what you eat and what you intake is part of that. I mean, our dad would always just say, you are what you eat, and he said if you put we would eat when we were eating like Cinnamon Toast Crunch or something like that. He's like, man, that's like putting sand in your engine. And as I get older, I'm like, yeah, that's probably true. What you eat is what you are, essentially, because that's the fuel that your body is taking in. And so I love that mission that you have. Now, I just one quick question about your website. I know that you can have an email list where folks can submit their emails. What do you send out with that?
Yeah, so ever since like I posted these videos a couple months ago now, and everything blew up, I'm like, whoa, I need to get some content like that I can email out and guides and all that. So I've been working on that a lot. And so right now, like if you sign up to my email list, I send out a free guide that basically just breaks down the 3 levels, level 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm planning on sending out a ton of stuff in the future. Like I want to build this thing over 10 plus years. So it's a long-term thing for me.
Yeah.
But I basically want to be the resource for this lifestyle and help people, get to the best version of themselves, whatever that looks like. And so, working on meal plans and stuff and other things will come pretty shortly here. Actually, I was working on them right before we hopped on here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very
So
good.
if you're looking for maybe some more information, more detailed information that we were able to fit into, an hour or so long podcast, go to
MeatPowered.
Brandon's website, meatpowered.com.
Yep.
And
we'll put that in the show notes as well as your
yeah.
Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube channels, so you guys can click that if you go to the show notes.
And I will say your videos are good too. They're kind of cinematic with some of the cooking and everything else. I know those take a lot of effort and everything to put together. So, I think everyone will benefit from maybe exploring a little bit more into what fits best in their diet and in consuming and putting into your body. I really like the idea, maybe the philosophy of kind of cutting some things out in these different stages and then saying that, well, I'm going to cut out this one thing and see how it makes me feel. And if I feel better, then okay, I know that I'm going to cut that thing out and then maybe something else and kind of maybe restricting it down to the base model and then adding things in slowly to say, oh, my body did not like that. Or, I noticed when I ate that, like the next day I went out and got super sunburned, right? That's just some crazy thing that you think that you wouldn't think of.
Yeah, it is crazy. Yeah. Yeah, and that's basically how I look at it. Like I do think that it's probably smart is if you don't have any like conditions or you're like looking to get like super ripped and get lean and all that stuff really fast. If you're just looking to, get started in this, I do think it's really smart to start there and like maybe slowly at the baseline level 1, just eat more nutrient rich foods. And then, consider eliminating some things and see how it goes and then work your way through. Like that's basically what I do. I go up and down between the levels. I use them as tools, kind of like a bodybuilder or a fighter. They get in shape for the show or the fight or whatever. And so they have different. Most of the time, they have different regimens for that.
So if somebody wanted to get super lean or super cut, what would you would just suggest the meat, salt, and water?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like Arnold Schwarzenegger built his body mostly on steak and eggs. I mean, it works, that's been a very common like thing for a long time. There was a guy in the 70s that made like steak and eggs a really big thing. I'm blanking on his name, but yeah. Anyways, it's just it works, like, and everybody knows that you cut out carbs, you tend to lose weight, and it's like the cool thing is, like, when you're eating steak, you're getting like everything your body needs from, for the most part. I mean, if you want to get a little, multivitamin or some organ meats or a little bit of other foods in there, certainly that makes a lot of sense for most people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And for our listeners, go check him out, and let's build that creed together. Thank you. Thank you,
Let's
Brandon.
do it. Thank you, Brandon.
Thanks for having me, guys.